The story begins with the view perspective of Ryuji, the main character, in a milky white space where we hear a girl's voice asking if she's going to die. The silhouette of the voice gradually takes shape as she gradually approaches him and calls his name. Ryuji wakes up to the alarm ringing. He sits up and tugs on his shirt before pulling it off and dumping it to the side. He opens up the fridge, gets stuff to eat, and leaves the house, passing a calendar with the 28th and 29th marked for summer school. While on the train, he stares at the train, only caught away by the cackles of two boys playing a game with a dragon in it. Foreshadowing. He eventually returns back to his depressing gaze. Ryuji arrives at school and is greeted by his classmates, one of whom obviously has a crush on him. I mean, why not? He's the main protagonist and not a loser like me. During their class, a girl with a sleeveless top, shorts, and dark shades busts into class and approaches Ryuji. Meet Ryuji's cousin, Erika. She leads him out and tells Ryuji that she recently returned from a trip abroad and that she has joined an organization called Seven Tails. She seeks Ryuji's help as he becomes the first member of the organization known as Seven Tails. She's still waiting though, meaning the group is ignoring her, so she wants to gain some traction. She decides that the only logical way to gain popularity or acceptance is by stealing an S-Class Lost Precious from the Fang. Cringe-ass name, by the way, though she knows of the mafia group's notoriety. Well, instead of explaining an elaborate plan, she decides it's time to get freaky with her cousin. At night, Ryuji and Erika lie in wait for the mafia. Ryuji plays the voice of reason by asking for her plan. She brings out a hammer that can release multiple illusion butterflies, making it a lost precious. Ryuji hears the name and puts on a demeaned countenance, but Erika cheers him up by saying that it's not a cursed lost and that she's no longer bothered about the 3-year prior incident. As she speaks, the mafia makes their entrance in the usual black cars, black suits, and black shades trope. They steal using her illusion butterflies to stun them. Ryuji carries the lost precious and tries to lift it, though it's heavy. As he drops it into Eriko's van, some of the Fang members arrive and shoot Arrow and Ryuji many times, forcing them to flee the area. Arrow uses her exceptional driving abilities to slow down other vehicles and tumble the package. The briefcase opens up after being hit by a bullet while Ryuji tries to stop it from dropping. Suddenly, a blonde female emerges from the briefcase and calls Ryuji by name. When Ryuji tries to get her back into the car, shots are fired at them by their adversaries. The girl unleashes a massive fire that destroys everything in its path, allowing Arrow and Ryuji to safely escape. Ryuji's school friend Misaki waits outside his building to try and deliver the bag he left in class, but hides when she sees his female bodyguards. Meanwhile, Erika becomes curious about the girl and finds it fascinating that she knows Ryuji's name. As the girl awakens, she turns aggressive to Erika for trying to touch her neck piece. But when she sees Ryuji, she leaves Erika and clings to him, saying his name repeatedly. Erika tries talking to the girl using various languages, but she doesn't answer. Instead, she keeps hugging Ryuji and calls him by name. Ryuji advises them to contact the society, but Erika says that Ryuji is in charge of watching the girl for the evening. Ryuji goes out to buy stuff when he meets Mosako outside. She says she wants to deliver his school bag and she shyly tries to ask who the hell is, but the plot is not ready for the romance yet. Ryuji receives a call from Erika and returns to his flat to find it in ruins. He learns that the girl went crazy after Ryuji left and refused to take a shower against Eriko's wishes. Erika compares the girl to a red dragon and displays a mark on her palm to Ryuji. Ryuji's return eases the tension in the house and everyone sits down to dine together. After supper, Erika proposes that Ryuji gives the girl a name, so he gives her Rose. Rose hugs Ryuji and cheers up after learning her name. The next morning, Ryuji wakes up to find Rose on his bed. He panics like every righteous protagonist. As they have breakfast, a scientist arrives at the residence via helicopter, shouting to ask if anyone has a dragon. 2 men and a woman, all in black suits, are in a car. The driver alerts the master at the back that they found the target. The master at the back threatens to kill him if he ever calls his fiancée a target again. As they transport Ryuji, Rose, and Erika to society, they discuss lost precious and dragons with Takura, a researcher on dragons. He's your typical anime scientist with enthusiasm and pseudo-perversion, so Yuno will share that he's happy to see Rose, a dragon, up close. He requests to see her dragon mark, but he's almost burned in the process. They reach a research facility and we find out that Ryuji actually has access to the place because he's a breaker, someone who can tame dragons. Actually, he's not just a breaker, but a level 10 breaker with popular scientist parents. And yeah, Erika is level 7. In the experiment room, Takura reveals that certain parts of Rose's body resemble humans. We also find out that Rose is the first dragon he's experimenting with. 90% of his research has been through a diary written by an anonymous character, which we find out to be most likely Ryuji. He explains that he got lost 10 years ago, the same time the journal was written, and stumbled upon a dragon egg that hatched in his eyes, the girl arising from within. This excites Takira because it shows that dragons can be tamed from birth, which he calls imprinting. He also records that Rose is growing and will eventually develop wings. That's if she hasn't already. The soldiers behind the screen discuss if a gun can kill a dragon. One of the soldiers says that he disagrees but comments that they'll have a weakness, and then he looks at Ryuji and Rose, who's still clinging to Ryuji. Meanwhile, Misaki and her classmates notice Ryuji is missing from class and speculate about his whereabouts. One of the classmates asks Misaki if she has his phone number. She's at Hanada, so obviously she doesn't. A classmate has, by the way, so they call him, but he doesn't pick up as he's not home. Misaki remembers that Ryuji had been carrying Rose on his back the day before and speculates about who she might be. Erika contacts Ryuji's mother after returning to the research facility and gives him her phone. He's hesitant at first, but he later takes the phone. On the phone, Ryuji's mother insists that he should not give the girl to the group and that she will go to Japan on the next airplane. In a poorly executed scene, Rose asks Ryuji why he looks sad, but he says he's fine. She also asks him if he's lonely, and he reacts to Rose harshly, pushing her away. The act of injustice by brother Ryuji leaves Rose on the verge of tears. Later, a strange figure arrives outside the research building claiming to be a dragon. Erika tells him to apologize. They may never see her again, you know. As he approaches her, Rose gets a strange feeling and detects someone outside the lab. The strange figure ambushes security guards and takes them down one by one. The man enters the research facility despite all protection mechanisms set in motion by the structure, and the facility is on red alert. More men take defensive stances to keep the odd man from entering the structure. The troops shoot the man once he enters the main building, noticing that he is only a teenage lad. The weird figure eliminates every soldier in the area and enters the main lab, where Takira, Erika, and Ryuji are located. He introduces himself as Onyx and declares his plans to take Rose with him because she's his fiancée, and the jewelry around her neck is proof of their engagement. Onyx knocks Erika unconscious after she accuses him of wearing her family jewels that were stolen by the Fang. As he's about to vanquish Ryuji, Rose goes heroic and decides to go with Onyx, who is well pleased. Once Rose agrees to go with Onyx, the duo gets into the car. Rose is sobbing and Onyx asks why she's still in the mood, though he saves her. She tries to vent, but Sigma isn't having it. Onyx uses his magical abilities to put Rose to sleep. Erika and Takira discuss the recent event. Onyx, the Black Dragon, has created an alliance with the Fang, and Erika is furious. She wants to know what can be done immediately, but it takes the pursuit squad to arrive. Meanwhile, Ryuji is depressed about what happened. At Onyx's house, Rose is lying in a chamber and Onyx enters and touches her face. Rose snaps to consciousness and strikes Onyx with a golden cup. Golden tanks it like it's nothing and explains his desire to marry Rose, referencing Rose's neckpiece as their inherited proof of engagement. Onyx also finds a tracking device on Rose and hands it to Kai, the female security guard, telling her to prepare for a showdown. She exits the room right away. Onyx discloses his genuine motives for the engagement, claiming it is a ritual that unleashes the full potential of the dragon. The ritual is called Engage. As Onyx is already strong on his own, Rose wonders why Onyx's drive for power. He explains that he wants to retrieve every lost precious. He tries to take her someplace else so they can cultivate their relationship, but Erika refuses, so he knocks her out again. Erika consoles Ryuji, telling him that Rose followed Onyx to save their lives. Ryuji remembers that it was Rose who emerged from the egg and saved him 10 years ago, and he expresses his desire to save Rose. Erika and Ryuji go through a route to a location where the lost precious are kept. She tells him that he had a reaction to the weapon in question, so she believes he can use it again. And yeah, it's made from a dragon's fangs. After opening the lock to the lost precious, he summons the magical abilities stored within the blade. In another scene, Rose wakes up at Onyx's house and exits her room, but Onyx comes in her way. Rose fires an attack at him, but Onyx is also on fire. Onyx threatens to kill our boy, and he then misleads Rose into thinking that humans and dragons cannot coexist. Rose sobs while Ryuji promises not to kill her if she just gives up on him. Suddenly, Kai alerts of an approaching chopper. Eriko, Tokura, and Ryuji arrive on a helicopter outside the skyscraper, where they see a magic field encircling Onyx's building. Ryuji uses his weapon to take out the magic field, and Ryuji, Tokura, Eriko, and other troops from the society enter the building after breaking the barrier. Eriko, Tokura, and Ryuji give way to the elevator, where they discover that Onyx is attempting to conduct Rose's pre-engagement ceremony and is determined to stop it. Rose warns Ryuji not to approach her and declares that she despises both Ryuji and people in general. Onyx smiles strangely as she speaks, and as she finishes, Rose starts to cry. Ryuji, however, confesses that he likes her, and Onyx replies that she loves him too. Well, she says it multiple times like a broken record. Onyx becomes enraged and gets ready to attack Ryuji. Rose intervenes by spreading her wings and stopping the attack. Rose and Ryuji engage in combat, and Rose uses her abilities to help Ryuji counter and beat Onyx's attack. Eriko fires at his eye to retrieve the piece of jewelry on his ear. Onyx argues that dragons and humans hate each other and are destined to kill themselves, but Rose forgot the part where that was her problem. This is the final straw as Onyx fully transforms into a dragon and demolishes half of the structure. Ryuji is forced to consider how to stop Onyx, who is now immune to simple magic strikes. In just the nick of time, Ryuji forms a mark out of nowhere, which allows him to transform Rose into fire and conjure her into his sword. He attacks with it, and Onyx is never to be found again for now. Takara drives them home as Rose watches the scene of Ryuji saying he loves her. She hugs him, and they drive into the glorious day. A week later, Ryuji and Rose fight, and Eriko watches the news. Ryuji's phone drops over to Eriko's side, and she checks it out. "You will be punished if you skip this outing. We're in for another one, boys." Apparently, Rose doesn't want Ryuji to go. Go figure. Despite her selflessness in the previous event, she lets her emotions get in the way and is ready to bring down the house with her wings just because she cannot cope with this. Eriko comes to the rescue by whispering something into Rose's ears to help her relax. Ryuji wonders what Eriko said. Ryuji arrives at a beach the day after leaving for his friend's summer vacation and meets Misaki, the girl who obviously has a crush on him. She's wearing something over herself as she thinks it's awkward. She's forced to remove it though, but Ryuji doesn't care anyway. Her friend cajoles her to talk to Ryuji at this golden moment, and she sucks up all the courage and self-esteem left in her. She calls on him, and he turns and runs in her direction. Misaki panics and acts shy when she sees Ryuji, but Ryuji runs past her. Rose shows up, and Ryuji wonders why Rose is there and discovers it's all Eriko's doing. Later on, Ryuji meets Maruga, a white dragon girl. Maruga recognizes Rose as a red dragon. Maruga's mission is to discuss her dealings with Ryuji. She wants the sword belonging to a white dragon to be returned after it was stolen by humans. Maruga also shares information that George Evans, a local church guy, is the owner of the sword and is a level 10 breaker who will not hesitate to use violence when it comes to dispelling the vermin called dragons. Maruga leaves, pressuring Ryuji and his allies to agree to the task. The next day, Ryuji goes to the chapel alone to look around, but finds nobody present. George discovers Ryuji at the church's entrance and invites him to the chapel. They share a tale about a dragon attacking a community, and the villagers revered the sword the hero left behind as the legendary blade after the dragon was slain and the hero vanished. Upon finishing his tale, George discloses his plans to use the sword to destroy dragons. Rose rushes in to give Ryuji a hug after seeing him talking to George at the chapel. Ryuji makes an effort to hide Rose's dragon mark there, but later, a few men enter the chapel in search of Rose. Long story short, she balded one of the big guys. George becomes enraged by their insolence in the house of God, so he swings the sword, leaving a significant amount of ice behind. Ryuji and Rose sneak away and return to the hotel together. Maruga expresses regret for withholding more information about the sword and clarifies that it is the heirloom of the White Dragon. She then begs Ryuji and the others to assist her in getting the sword back from George. Later that night, Ryuji goes to a festival with the others. It's all fun and games here until George appears. From George's perspective, all he can see is love at first sight. He immediately goes cahoots for Maruga, even chasing vermin bald guys around. When things are calm, Maruga begins telling Ryuji a story that effectively conveys the idea that humans and dragons cannot coexist, and George comes into the picture. Sheesh. Talk about bad luck. The next day, Maruga joins Ryuji and Eriko in their hotel room, discussing their plans for George's next move. Eriko wants Maruga to take advantage of George's affection for her to get the sword back from the church, and she agrees. Much to Ryuji's disapproval, they meet up at the beach to execute their plans. Eriko sees George and tells him that Maruga doesn't know how to swim. But love-struck hero goes on to get the floats for her. They tell Maruga to take off her clothes, leaving only her swimsuit, and she reluctantly does it. George arrives and he's mesmerized by what he sees. Anyway, he takes her into the water to teach her to swim, but we find out that Eriko has other plans. Suddenly, Maruga's bread disappears and she jumps on our boy Ryuji. Apparently, that's a lost precious right there. I wonder why it exists. There must be some crazy perverts in this world. Since she has lost her bra, Eriko urges George to find it. With all enthusiasm, our simp dives into the sea beyond. That's when Eriko reveals that it's just an elaborate scheme to stall Juge-sen so that they can steal the heirloom. Rose is upset because Ryuji is going to steal something significant from George, so she stays behind while they go. For some reason, Misako comes into the picture just when Rose is talking to herself about whether Ryuji hates her and has been lying to her, though they're engaged. But the plot. Ero and Ryuji arrive at the church and witness a man threatening the church members with a knife. He is holding a child captive. Eriko uses her illusion dance to get him distracted, and Ryuji saves the boy, but they are unable to steal the sword in the process because the rescue mission/sword retrieval was just a half-assed plan. So it's only the rescue mission part that succeeded. But once again, the plot. The police arrest the man, and as they are taking him away, some of the church members comment that the man was a peaceful man until a blonde guy, aka George, comes. George thanks Ryuji for trying to keep the church safe and leaves right away. Maruga confirms that the sword is a cursed precious capable of mind control and that her uncle was the white dragon that was slain in the past. While George is contemplating in the church auditorium, Onyx guard Kai walks up to ask him if he needs answers. At the hotel, Maruga explains the lore behind her uncle and how much he loved her. She wants to save him from the sword in a way. Ryuji and Rose argue over whether to speak with George personally over this issue. Ryuji believes is a poor idea as he fears that George will fight her if he discovers Rose is a dragon. Rose barges out of their presence in a fit of rage, and Ryuji, Eriko, and Maruga continue to discuss. They later discover Rose is missing, immediately storming out to save her from her stupidity. Oops. I mean her anim righteousness. Oops. I mean George's clutches. Misaki and her classmates stop Ryuji, Ero, and Maruga as they run out of the hotel. Ryuji, Ero, and Maruga leave after Ryuji gives Misaki a gift he won previously, and they continue their journey. George discovers that Rose is actually a dragon when he sees her flying towards him with wings. He asks her if she wants ice cream, and Loli said yes. The crew drive in a car to get to the church. They get there after a rather weak discussion on forgiveness and evil between Rose and George. The two also have a heated conversation about dragon hypotheses, leading to George drawing the sword. Ryuji arrives in time to witness George slashing his sword toward Rose with the intention of hurting her. George pauses for a moment, listening to Ryuji's attempts to persuade him that Rose is not a monster. Eriko requests that George turn over the cursed sword, but he refuses. Maruga enters the chapel, revealing that the sword is cursed, and George turns to violence. Rose begs Ryuji to save George, and our boy doesn't turn down his harem's request. Eriko uses her magic on him, and he freezes it. After a bit of battle, Ryuji approaches Rose for assistance in taking down George, and through their bond, Rose gives him that flaming sword ability again. Maruga cages him in a cell of ice, but he breaks out of the ice cage and is about to slash Maruga when Ryuji uses his flaming sword to destroy the cursed sword. George eventually gets back to his usual self and is taken aback by the fact that the dragons he despises saved him. The next day, Maruga prepares to leave the beach, and Rose becomes envious of Ryuji because he has another harem too, lol. Our boy Ryuji is all suited up and on his way through a park. Don't ask me where he's going. He looks up and sees a girl standing on a branch under one of the trees. The girl falls from the tree, and Ryuji jumps to the rescue. She falls on him, but she seems mad about it. It seems she was trying to save a cat, and she intentionally jumped down. Ryuji tries to strike up a conversation with the girl by asking her if she's here for the society meeting. Now you have your answer, but is met with rejection, a sign that she'll join his harem group really soon. Ryuji attends a party at a building, where he meets Eriko and Rose. Eriko tells them about the event and the people present. Let's just say they're around people who are collectors, including a rich guy with a Ginny lamp and a poor collector named Makara, whose collection was stolen 10 years ago. Life happens. A guy calls their attention and introduces himself as Seki, a guy with a hobby of finding missing treasure items. He's excited to see Eriko, by the way. They both talk stuff until Ryuji sees the girl from the tree and asks her if she is part of the event, but she responds yes and walks away. Rose accuses Ryuji of being disloyal. Then a cat person with heterochromia suddenly shows up at the gathering and starts stealing people's belongings, almost stealing Eriko's lost precious, which was saved by Ryuji's intervention. He recognizes her as the person from earlier, so he lets her go when he notices that she is protecting an old woman from a stray knife. I have to admit that Odd Eye really flexed on those security officers. I couldn't stop thinking of the meme where Lebron does a one-hand dunk over a player. Real epic stuff. Back at home, Eriko thanks Ryuji for his efforts in helping her keep her lost precious. Ryuji asks what its ability is, and she explains that it has the ability to hear the truth of someone if the two earrings are worn at the same time. She also explains that it can only be worn by female breakers, especially one who is in love with the other. Apparently, the ring comes from a woman who had her heart broken by someone. After the gist with Eriko, Ryuji goes to his room to rest but wakes up to discover Rose on his bed. He covers her up and goes out to the living room, where he notices something strange about the residence. The Odd Eyes was in Eriko's room trying to steal her lost precious. He stops her and is bound to her when Eriko awakens and points an enchanted item at him. Eriko, Rose, Ryuji, and Odd Eyes, who is called Egg, begin to create cordial bonds with each other because 1. Yuji cannot be unbounded from her until 24 hours, says the scientist, and 2. That's what people do to thieves who storm their homes. They question her reason for stealing, which she admits is of her own volition to her master, who took her in when she was abandoned by her parents. The Odd Eyes actually believes that everyone should profit from lost precious, and that it shouldn't be monopolized by a select few. They explain to her that Rose is a dragon and that she shouldn't be scared or distrusting of them. Eriko goes to ask Takara about the Odd Eyes master and finds out that she's most likely working for Furumori, a level 9 breaker and 70-year-old missing priceless researcher. Ero and Rose meet with Furumori, who is later revealed to be disguised as Seki, who knocks Eriko and Rose out. Ryuji is also gassed when he accuses Seki of being Furumori. Unconscious Ryuji, Seki, and A travel to his secret location. On the way, Seki remembers the motivational words of the protagonist to stay away from such an oppressive and manipulative environment. When they get to the secret hideout, the rope comes off, and they both decide to lock Ryuji in the underground laboratory. They enter a chamber where the lost precious is kept in a box. They talk a bit before he leaves to get something for the thing to drink. Seki, suddenly overcome by the unrealistic drive to look beautiful, wears the earrings. She hears his thoughts and discovers that he's been lying to her all along and that she was actually abducted and used for the past 15 years. Seki discovers that she has direct access to Seki's thoughts. She shows Seki the lost treasure on her ears, letting him know that she is hearing what he is thinking. Eriko verifies Seki's identity and learns that he is A's master. Ai goes to the room where Ryuji is and, you know what? Let me not bore you with the details. Let's just say she discovers Ryuji is telling the truth, so she starts crying. She leaves the cell with Ryuji, crying and telling him that her master has been lying to her throughout the time. Ryuji invites her to stay at his house, and they chat about their intentions. As they are about to leave, Seki stops them on the way they try to escape, but Seki uses magic to stop Ryuji from going. Ryuji is now certain that Seki is a breaker, but he questions what lost precious he uses while using magic. To Ryuji's amazement, Seki removes his shirt to show off his body's marks and says that these are where his powers come from. Seki discloses his pursuit of ultimate power, saying that the only way to get it is to fuse a breaker with a lost precious. We also realize that AI is actually a human that the Creepshow experimented on. I'll have to admit that everything goes so fast that the characterization is such a poor execution. I think they'll need to learn from it. Fullmetal Alchemist on this one. Ryuji escapes Seki's presence and leaves with Ai. Eriko later learns that Seki's actions are a direct result of his colleague's previous death, which occurred because society declined to disclose lost precious, which would have prevented his colleague's death. While they are outside, Seki catches up to them using his dark octopus tentacles to get to the roof quickly. Seki reveals that his intention is to become one with Ai, but Ryuji doesn't have any of that. Ryuji realizes that A's life is in jeopardy and swears to defeat Seki and defend her. However, Ryuji still has to fight him without anything, so he's getting the whooping of a lifetime. Rose arrives just in time to break things up. Ryuji does his combo transformation sword scene and nullifies Seki's incoming attack. To cut a long story short, Seki creates a dark magic similar to Blackbeard's from One Piece and captures them. Rose, on the other hand, uses her abilities to release everyone in attendance since her harem master is in danger. This dispels Seki's magic and drains his abilities in the process. Seki falls unconscious and Ai runs to him. He awakens and sees Ai sobbing next to him. Ryuji asks him to turn from his sins, but he believes he has not done anything wrong. He then uses the last tattoo over his stomach region to dissolve his body into sand, and then he fades into oblivion. I asks him what he thinks about her, but he says he never loved her. The tingling of the truth earring may have revealed something else, but we, the viewers, are left to wonder. They ask A for her next move, but she has nowhere to go. Luckily, Takara enters the scene and reveals her father's identity to be the broke collector from before. Also, her real name is Eka. Ryuji and his group are shocked to learn about their family. Nevertheless, they do say their goodbyes to her, as she boards a helicopter to see her relatives. As they watch the helicopter fade into the horizon, Ryuji tells Eriko to register him as a level 10 breaker because this time he wants to learn about lost precious and help people around him. Ryuji gets ready for school when he sees Rose wearing a school uniform. He first forbids her from going to school, but allows her to later on. Eriko then informs him that the society has accepted his level 10 application, and that he will be meeting with a specialist at the school. In preparation for this event, he brings his own. In class, Misaki finds out that she's now in the same class as Rose, which puts her in an awkward situation. Apparently, the teacher makes a convincing statement that Rose is an American who is allowed to skip grades because of how smart she is. They ask Rose what she likes, and she says ice cream and Ryuji, making Misaki shout no. As they reconcile the issue, Bianca enters the classroom holding a bazooka and shoots at our boy Ryuji, who can outrun a missile. In the process of running, Eriko throws his sword to him, and he uses it to slice the missile in half. So, who's Bianca? We find out that she's a researcher of the San Francisco unit of the Society Level 4. Bianca is assigned to perform several analyses on Ryuji, including his name, age, parents' names, birthday, and other details. Rose is against such an idea. Ryuji persuades Rose to observe from a distance so that Bianca can examine him. She agrees, and we get the misleading stripping imperative that permeates the air through Bianca's lips. As they observe what transpires in Ryuji's classroom, Misaki and Mao get interested in the recent incident. Ryuji is ordered to undress in order to get his body measured. He doesn't want Bianca to do it, so Rose takes over, saying she knows all about his body. In a stroke of luck, its classmate Masato arrives on the scene. Ryuji's information is gathered and recorded, and Bianca wants to know if Ryuji's heritage has anything to do with his level 10 talent. Ryuji keeps giving Bianca access to his personal data, but things quickly become tense when he is questioned about his interactions with women, the segs. And like every other anime protagonist with a harem, he's as clean as ever. Later that day, Bianca, Ryuji, and the others leave the school building to test Ryuji's ability to use Lost Precious. The society group are benevolent enough to send in high military tech, a humanoid Neo-Golem, to act as Ryuji's adversary. Bianca says that she has placed a limit on the robot in order to test the extent of his abilities and sets off the battle in a blast. Because of the Misaki and the other innocent bystanders, Eriko uses her magic to stop them from seeing the fight before it starts. During the fight, Ryuji takes a beating. The Neo-Golem beats him to the ground and is about to pound him down. Bianca tries to stop the golem with her remote but finds out that the remote isn't working and the limiter is off. He's able to dodge the string blow, but the golem picks Ryuji up. Rose notices that Ryuji is in danger and flies to save him in defiance of his command to avoid showing her wings in public. Bianca also wears some tech armor in order to fight and stop the golem manually, but is greatly hindered. Ryuji and Rose combine for the flaming sword transformation, and Ryuji attacks Neo-Golem with the strong swing of the sword that cuts the Neo-Golem. Bianca measures Ryuji's energy value and discovers that it is the highest ever recorded in history. Rose expresses regret for using her abilities, but Ryuji thanks her for her assistance. Meanwhile, Kai, Onex's guard, observes everything from a distance and departs the scene. When Ryuji shows up at school the day after the fight, Bianca apologizes for upsetting him. The day is Ryuji's birthday, so Masato shows up on the scene and extends an invitation to Ryuji and the others for a group date. Misaki sees Ryuji and presents him with a gift, which Ryuji appreciates. When he opens it up, he sees it's a frog-related gift and freaks out. Unfortunately, Bianca discovers that Misaki is misinformed when she looks up Ryuji's likes in his data. Bianca had switched his likes for his dislikes. During the pandemonium, Rose smiles, saying that school is fun. Days later, Eriko receives a large parcel from someone at the society. Eriko, Ryuji, and Rose open it halfway and see that it's a painting that's a lost precious. As they plan to open it further, they are interrupted by Obi Misaki, who shows up at Ryuji's building. She comes with her friends and her friend Ai, and she brings cookies. They share the cookie together, and Rose, Ero, Misaki, Ai, and Ryuji notice something strange about the mysterious painting. Eriko discovers the artwork and believes it to be a lost treasure, while Misaki and others are drawn into it. They find Liar appearing all over the painting, which makes them wonder what's happened. While appraising it, they notice a man in the picture and the girls are drawn into it, so it's up to Ryuji to save his harem. Eriko and the others reunite to exchange information about the mysterious painting, which they believe is a ghost town. Eriko compares their predicament to a horror film where a vicious killer was pursuing a group of girls disguised with an axe. Misaki suddenly alarms the rest upon seeing a man who resembles the murderer Eriko has just described. The man attacks the women, but Eriko and the others manage to escape. They cry for their hero to come to the rescue. As they enter a residence, they lock the door and discover themselves in images hanging on the wall with the word liar printed on them. As they explore the building, Misaki finds herself in an interrogation session with a shadow in a mirror. The shadow calls her a liar and tries to attack her, but is saved in the nick of time. Bianca informs Ryuji that the painting exclusively draws XX chromosomes, explaining why the others were removed. Eriko and the others show up in a location where they are questioned by a shadow that resembles themselves in a mirror. During the interrogation, each person responds truthfully to questions posed by the shadow in the mirror. Misaki confesses that her most significant experience was meeting Ryuji, and the masked man from before enters the room where they all are. He accuses all women of being liars and begins to attack them. Meanwhile, Ryuji takes advantage of Bianca's absorption into the painting to assault the man. By forcing his sword through the portal opening, Bianca becomes enormous and absorbs all the girls in the artwork, saving them all. Bianca discloses that the picture was created by a man who was deceived by his girlfriend and was imprisoned in the process. Everything seems to have a happy ending, but can it be when you see a shadow emerging from behind the painting? Eriko, Ryuji, Ai, Rose, and Misaki are all on vacation at a certain spot near the woods around springtime. Rose and Ai start to cry uncontrollably due to the onions they are chopping. Ryuji goes to carry out the packages and meets Eriko, who is drinking beer. He asks her for help, but she denies it, excusing herself because she drove them there and is tired. The Anon gets self-conscious when Eriko talks about being killed in this area, and Ryuji responds that they've done it the last time. That's classic. Sad, we don't get this much quality throughout the Anon. A few minutes later, a blue dragon comes to Ryuji's location. She introduces herself as Seifi, Onyx's future bride, and reveals her plans to strike Ryuji because of what he did to Onyx. Her attack backfires as her powers are weak, so Ryuji and Eriko are unaffected by her strikes. She fails to lift water from the river with her powers, causing Rose and others to get wet. Ero gets pissed and uses her lost precious magic to make Seifi fall into the water, leaving her in shame and fleeing. Misaki discovers that Rose is a dragon, and Misaki also discovers that Ai is a werewolf, which comes as a shock. Ryuji is absent at school, and Misato is pissed because Ryuji did not invite him to the barbecue party earlier. Later, Eriko and Ryuji attend an event where they meet people from society, including Tokura and Bianca. Rose leaves school with Misaki, and on the way she appreciates Misaki's effort to keep her secret. They split ways to different locations and head to their various homes. On the way to Ryuji's house, Safi and Rose meet. Safi tries to attack Sophie, but it backfires once again. Rose takes her to her home and gets her a change of clothes. Later on, they discuss a ritual to become a real dragon. Rose reveals that she only likes Ryuji and not Onyx, and that she is engaged to Ryuji. They have a conversation about becoming an adult, which captivates Rose's attention. In the end, she decides to become an adult. Eriko and Ryuji arrive home and find out that Seifi gave Rose the information about becoming an adult, and they have second thoughts about it. But Rose convinces Ryuji to make her an adult, which involves kissing her dragon mark. He agrees, and after the ritual is completed, Rose behaves strangely around Ryuji due to her change in emotions. Ryuji wonders what could be the problem, but Eriko comforts her. It turns out that Rose's feelings for Ryuji have become more intense as a result of the ritual. Meanwhile, Miranda finds out that the Black Dragon has broken into her library and gone through forbidden books. The following day, Ryuji, Eriko, and Rose all sit and eat breakfast at the dining table, and the atmosphere gets tense between them. Eriko eats a piece of bread while Ryuji and Rose act weirdly. They both touch a carton of milk at the same time and blush. That gets Eriko irritated. Later that morning, Rose and Ryuji head to school, with Ryuji maintaining a distance from her. Meanwhile, Bianca arrives at Ryuji's apartment to see Eriko and get a scientifically nutritious breakfast. Eriko narrates all that went down between Ryuji and Rose the previous day and adds that she is stressed by Ryuji's situation. Meanwhile, Mao meets up with Misaki and asks if Misaki is now friends with Rose. Ryuji walks into the classroom and Misaki greets him. Rose walks in behind Ryuji and rushes to seek advice from Misaki and Mao, while Ryuji shares with Masato that Rose has been acting strangely around him recently. The conversation between Rose and Misaki ends as it is almost time for class, and Mao is not happy that Misaki is speaking with Rose because Misaki likes Ryuji and Rose is a competition. On their way to class, Rose bumps into Ryuji and they do not maintain eye contact with each other. Meanwhile, Bianca searches the deep secret database for information about dragons. It's mostly biology, reproduction, and science stuff, so they're not able to understand Rose's emotions. Rose is very troubled at school and becomes apparent during the PE class. She just sits on her own, and this concerns Misato. They notice she turns all red when she watches Ryuji run, or it's both of them, actually. At home, Safi comes back saying she forgot her shoes. Eriko jumps her with her illusion dance attack and ties her up with the lost precious. Bianca and Eriko interrogate Seifi about Rose's condition, and Seifi explains that it's her period of ovulation. It only lasted Seifi a whole night before it eventually calmed down. Meanwhile, Rose's tension seems to increase, so she attempts the pole vault but falls and lands poorly, causing her to breathe heavily and leaving other students to witness the event. People advise them to take her to the infirmary, but Ryuji refuses and rushes her out of the school premises. She is rushed to a hospital run by the society, where Tokura reveals that he did not find anything wrong with Rose externally and suggests giving her some medications to make her feel better. However, Ryuji is upset seeing Rose lying unconscious in the hospital and asks Seifi what he can do to save her. Shockingly, Kai appears in the room after infiltrating the facility with a fake ID. She retrieves Safi's shoes and delivers a message to Ryuji, who accepts the message. At the top of the hospital, Ryuji finds out that he is the cause of Rose's condition, and that she might die if Ryuji does not hand her over. To put it in perspective, Ryuji is actually a lost precious with the power to control dragons, and that's why Rose seemingly likes her, but truly she fears him. Also, the dragon connection should be fine with another dragon and none else. That's why she's reacting differently. Onyx explains that Rose needs another dragon to survive and tells Ryuji to make a choice. Ryuji heeds Onyx's wishes and heads to get Rose, but he is attacked by soldiers before being pinned by guards. As a result, Eriko and Ryuji are placed under house arrest by the society for 2 days. In school, Misaki summons the courage to meet Ryuji and discuss his recent change in behavior. Their conversion ends when Misaki offers to help Ryuji whenever he is in need, but Ryuji believes he's fine. Later that evening, Ryuji meets Maruga at the entrance of his building. She says that she needs to speak with him. In somewhere that's probably Onyx's castle, we see the milky atmosphere from Rose's perspective. She sees a young version of Ryuji crying before waking up. When she wakes up, Safi is by her side, but she cannot recognize her. Meanwhile, Maruga reveals that Onyx attacked her library and obtained information from some books. Bianca also deciphers that Onyx and Maruga must have known each other for a while, as Onyx was living in her kingdom as a child. Ryuji leaves Eriko's presence to get ingredients for dinner, and Maruga pursues him, falling down and hurting her leg in the process. Ryuji helps Maruga with her leg, and they both enter into a conversation. During their conversation, Ryuji reveals all that Onyx told him in the past about Rose's condition and blames himself for Rose's condition. Maruga counters Ryuji, stating that there is a tendency for Onyx's theory to be wrong and that there might be a way to take Rose away from Ryuji so that Onyx can have Rose all to himself. Maruga also reveals that the instinct of a black dragon is to obtain the power of a red dragon, and that the changes in Ryuji are due to a lost precious / breath. She explains the reason behind Ryuji's changes and suggests that a new possibility for a relationship between man and dragon may be present in the relationship between him and Rose. Safi leaves a message on their window for where they can find Rose, and Ryuji returns home with Maruga on his back. The following day, Misaki notices Ryuji is absent from school and heads to his house to see him. Ryuji tells her that he is leaving and she gives her full support. Eriko calls Takara while en route to the airport and learns that Onyx and his allies plan to take off in a private plane. She quickens her pace to reach the airport more quickly after learning this information. Kai meets Rose and Safi at the airport later that night. Onyx is seated when they are all aboard the private jet. When he sees Rose, he instructs Safi to go get a snack to help Rose refresh her mind. When Onyx notices Maruga on the runway before the jet takes off, he gets shocked. He gives the order to take off even after spotting Maruga, but Maruga utilizes her abilities to change the plane's course of motion. Since the society has now taken over the airport, some guards are driving around the aircraft to keep it from taking off. Eriko runs into the runway with Ryuji, and the two of them speed to catch up with the aircraft. Onyx gets up and exits the private jet, intending to tackle the problem himself because of what is going on outside the aircraft. After he departs, Safi takes advantage of the chance to remind Rose about Ryuji. Rose's memories are jolted as she takes Safi's ice cream, and she starts to think of Ryuji. In the meantime, Ryuji, Ero, and I are at the airport, and with a little trouble, we are all able to board the aircraft. Rose remembers who Ryuji is after Ryuji sees her on the plane and gives her an embrace. Ryuji says he will defend her and pledges to stay at her side. Shortly after, Onyx changes into a gigantic dragon and raises the aircraft off the ground. In the distance, Ryuji's father boomerangs his dagger-like sword at Onyx, but Onyx takes no damage. Ryuji and Rose share a kiss on the private aircraft, and the energy from the kiss causes Onyx to be affected by a powerful magical surge that causes him to dissolve in midair. Following that, Ryuji's parents meet with Bianca, who is a huge fan of theirs, and she signs their autograph. The private jet successfully lands a few seconds later. When Ryuji returns the next day, Misaki is relieved to see him at school. Mao is still committed to Misaki and getting Ryuji and Misaki together. Rose comes in with braided hair, and the rest of his harem comes into the picture. A teacher who looks like Kai then walks into the classroom as Bianca continues to boast about gaining the signatures of Ryuji's parents. During class, Ryuji and Rose hold hands. Meanwhile, Takara is spying on them from a hidden camera.